What's going on, YouTube? Let's move the chains. We are in the home stretch of the United States Football League season and the start of the CFL, along with Major League Football news, USFL news. A lot of exciting things going on. We just had the fan controlled football championships, and then fan controlled football also. This isn't really football related, but they're doing fan controlled basketball, which is really cool and unique. So, with that being said, we'll cover a little bit, talk about the United States Football League, what's going on there with the playoffs. We have our playoffs officially set for the United States Football League. So that's going to be really exciting. And we should just take a moment, real quick, to appreciate that through all that we've gone through, especially on this channel, through all the spring football leagues, the USFL has done it. They're about to complete their regular season, which to me is so fantastic, so huge, so big for the USFL, for football fans all around. An incredible achievement from the USFL, from Fox, from NBC. It's not easy to put together a football league, and they have done it. They have been able to achieve what a lot of people have not been able to achieve, and that's get through a successful season of football. And I'm extremely excited to see the playoffs, and I'm excited to see what they do in year 2. How are they going to expand? How are they going to attract more fans, grow their audience, get more TV viewership? And the playoffs, they're going to be fun. I'm very excited. We had them settled after I believe the final spot was the Bandits game. Bandits lost, so they lost their potential playoff spot. We also had the CFL opening weekend, and it's evident that you really need an off season of full preparation, full play. With the CFL, the offenses were firing off on all cylinders for the most part. I watched all the games. 2 of them were really fun. The others were kind of blowouts. So, Alouettes, Stampeders, obviously, that was the opener. What a great way, by the way, to open for the CFL, 30-27, Stamps on top. It was an incredibly exciting game, a lot of offense. Then the Red Blacks, Blue Bombers. Blue Bombers looked a little bit sloppy, but hey, they found a way to win. The other 2 games were blowouts, but I will say that the Lions Elks game was like a fun blowout because the BC Lions just looked so good and so dominant. And Nathan Rourke looked so amazing that it was really an enjoyable blowout to watch. I don't know if any of y'all can resonate with that. Most people turn the TV off when there's a score differential of 59-15 and they were up by like 30 points at halftime. Not me, though. I kept watching, and Nathan Rourke is one of the greatest Canadian quarter. I mean, I was a fan of Nathan Rourke when he was at Ohio. I've actually had the pleasure of knowing him and been able to contact him multiple times when he was in college. So I'm really excited for him to see him thriving in this CFL. All right, let's get in. We have some questions, and I apologize for starting the stream a little later than usual. That's why we might have some people trickling in last second. All right, who do you have between the Breakers and the Stallions? I'm going to go Stallions here. I feel like for me, the Breakers have kind of just been, but you can say the same for the Stallions, trending down in play. For me, it's offensively. Can the Breakers really break through? Defensively, I guess I would say I trust the New Orleans Breakers. I still think that they're one of the best defenses in the league, and I also think that they have one of the best defensive lines. And it's going to be a really fun one because the Breakers, remember, they had the opportunity to beat the Stallions not too long ago, but came up just short. And it feels like, if there's a time to win, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. So if the Stallions can do it, and me just saying that makes me think that the Breakers could eventually pull through and beat the Stallions. But 3 times is so hard. So, now that I think about it and I want to dive deep into it, I got to watch the replays of those 2 games between the 2 teams to see how they played out, what were the real advantages and disadvantages of both teams. But that one's really tough because, the Stallions, they're probably the favorite. I know that they're the favorite to win it all right now, odds-wise with Vegas, but it's hard to beat a team 3 times, and to beat the Breakers a 3rd time would be absolutely incredible. Do you think the quality of the USFL football is better than the XFL? No, I do think that the XFL football quality is a bit better. I would say that the USFL is a little bit more on par with the Alliance of American Football. And part of that is really and truly the XFL had higher salaries for a lot of their players. They had more prep time. Um, and I think they did a better job at holding combines, and the way that they evaluated players early in the season was, they had those player combines that traveled all around the country, and the USFL just didn't have that. It felt a little bit last minute. Not to say that the football hasn't been fun. I will say this, the enjoyment of the games has been greater for me in the USFL a little bit more than the XFL because all of the games in the USFL have been extremely close. Like almost all of them are 1 to 2 score games. Part of that, I think, in my opinion, and it's just a theory, it's probably a lot of things. But one of my leading theories is that it's because all the games are in one place. They're in Birmingham. You don't have the travel. You don't have any other disadvantages or advantages. They're really the players just every Saturday, Sunday, and sometimes Friday. They're just walking across the street and playing the game they love. Makes it a lot easier. And in my opinion, I think that's why maybe the entertainment factor of the games is better. But I think that like the quality, the players in the XFL overall, and even the top players, like you can even just look at from quarterbacks wise, from wide receivers, there are less drops. I felt the offensive lines blocked better. Um, Special teams in the XFL were better, but remember the USFL had the chip in the football that really hurt the special teams and affected the weight of the ball. And still, the special teams hasn't truly been up to par with what the XFL had. So I would say it's kind of, depending on which way you look at it, you can answer that question in multiple different ways. What XFL teams are confirmed, and for the remaining spots, what cities would you guess? So I've done a couple of videos on this. We don't really have uh, confirmation from the league. There were leaks from the league, so we can talk about leaks, but confirmed would mean that the league has said, hey, these are the teams. The league did actually reveal or accidentally they've had a couple of accidental leaks, by the way. The cities on their team store or on their store, the XFL store, some merchandise was leaked. You saw San Antonio, you saw St. Louis, I believe you saw Orlando. So go ahead and I'll list out the 8 teams. So San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, Orlando, DC, Las Vegas. Sorry, it's hard to do this off the top of my head. Seattle. Was that 8 or is that 7? I think I'm missing one. Oh gosh, who am I missing? Did I say St. Louis? Did I say Orlando, DC? I feel like that was 8. Oh, Vegas. Sorry. Yeah, Vegas is the one that's more up in the air for a lot of people, but it's pretty much almost confirmed that those are the 8 teams. I would say that Vegas is the least likely of the 8. Like if you're a betting man, but still, it's pretty likely that Vegas will be that team. I don't necessarily agree with having Vegas. I don't know if I really love it, but hey, prove me wrong, XFL. what teams would likely sign the USFL stars? I don't quite. I assume that you're saying like what USFL, like what of the best players from the USFL will get picked up by an NFL team. Now, it's hard to tell, obviously, what specific team, because like in the XFL, I would probably say the most impactful XFL player in the NFL was a guy who never even played a snap in the XFL, and that's Taylor Heineke, the former backup for the St. Louis Battlehawks, who went on to reach the NFL playoffs and almost beat Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There are a couple guys, though, I think there are a lot of defensive players that I would say have a really nice shot. And unfortunately, with these spring leagues, sometimes it comes down to, yeah, they're talented players, but they may not be big enough. Like if they play along the defensive line or if they're a linebacker, they may not have the arm length to play in the NFL. Like there are a lot of measurables and things like that that sometimes a player just really can't overcome in terms of size. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality. Couple names that come to mind like Donald Payne, Chris Odom, Channing Stribling. He leads the league in interceptions. I think that he should have a chance. I in terms of quarterbacks, I think Case Cookus has the best shot. Kyle Sloter, you would make a case because he's already really familiar with a lot of National Football League teams. So, but I don't know if he would get signed because he was a player in the USFL. I think that he would be signed more likely because NFL scouts, NFL teams already know him and have already had him on their roster, if that makes sense. Darius Victor is a guy who I could see possibly getting a shot. I would hope that maybe Kayvonte Turpin, if an NFL team could figure out how to really use him, I think that would be really, really cool. And, I love obviously what he's been able to do. So those are a handful of players who lead the league in the statistical categories. But like I said, they're going to be guys who you may not know. And of course, they're going to be offensive linemen, but they're going to be guys who maybe didn't get as much playing time who could make it to an NFL roster like your Taylor Heineke's. And I see that you have the Washington football logo on your YouTube. So that's kind of my answer. We're going to see some guys, but I don't know if we're going to see as many guys that as the XFL or maybe even the AAF even had. And also the rosters are smaller, so statistically they have less of a shot at getting as many players. Dream Super Bowl matchup? I don't really have a dream Super Bowl matchup per se. Um Gosh, I don't really know. I would say this, Chargers beating anybody because I like the Chargers. So any team that challenges the Chargers in the Super Bowl from Los Angeles, as long as the Chargers are in it, then I would say I'm happy. I assume that this question is pertaining to the XFL. Do you think they will change uniforms and logos for the XFL? And that's what I'm going to assume with this question because I've had a couple of questions like this in the past. So I don't know that they're. So I think that they're going to keep some of the names. Like, there's no way they change the St. Louis Battlehawks. I think that they'll keep the Seattle Dragons, and we've already had some leaks that support that. As far as names for the teams, and like for example, I don't know that the Vipers are going to be in Orlando. Like for some of the teams that have moved around, I don't know that they're just gonna, shift it. I feel like they would create something new and not be the Orlando Vipers, just because the team theoretically moved from Tampa Bay to Orlando. So it's kind of a yes and a no that I think they'll change. I really do think that Under Armour could be the uniform supplier. I don't know. They could end up reusing some of the XFL uniforms and creating some new ones. I'd love to see the DC Defenders return. I love that logo. But apparently, from what we've been hearing, the DC Defenders will be a different name. And that could mean that they have different colors and a whole different uniform. I think that the Battlehawks will stay the same, maybe just a facelifted uniform and logo. And honestly, I'm not too concerned with that. But it's tricky. I think that they're going to change some and keep some. I don't think that they're going to do one or the other. I think that they're going to keep it kind of in the middle there. Gregory, thank you so much. Fox NBC, City of Birmingham, Jefferson County, BJCC for a fantastic USFL season. I'm looking forward to season 2. That's the spirit. Season 2 already of the USFL season. The hype is building, and it'll be fun to see how they really manage that, which coaches will see return, which players we see return, and how this is all going to play out because now they have this first season under their belt. It should be everything and more from the second season of the United States Football League. They should find their strengths, build on them. And then, I think some coaches should probably be let go. We'll talk about that another day, though. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what they do in season 2. And it, from what we've heard, by the way, it looks like they'll keep Birmingham as the hub city. I would not be surprised if they go up into a northern city and find a northern hub and have a southern and northern hub. So, I'm just making an example, maybe they have games in New Jersey and in Birmingham, and they have this kind of hub city format again, just in another city, and slowly build out these fan bases. That would be interesting. Or Philly, or wherever in Michigan, if they want to have it in Detroit. Could really be anywhere. I want the MLFB to succeed. I want the Arkansas attack to succeed. Arkansas needs a pro team. My question is, if the MLFB does not work out, could the MLFB teams jump to another league? No, it looks like they're all going to be, team and league owned. So I don't think that would ever happen. Oops, sorry, I skipped up on some questions. Let me catch up in the chat. So the XFL legal troubles are over. Well, no, not quite. So they still have a little bit of battle with Together, the clothing company, but Together really has no grounds. There's actually, if you go watch the Markcast, he has an interview with an expert on all of these trademarks, things of that nature. In a nutshell, they really don't have much ground. So I wouldn't be worried about the XFL and the logo and things like that. Do you really feel like the USFL will make it to next season with this hub city? So, Rich, that's a great question. I think that they're going to expand into another hub city. I think they're going to have possibly 2 to 3 hub cities, and hopefully they can find team owners. I know that we've talked about that in the past, and we had rumors of Alex Rodriguez owning the New Jersey Generals possibly. I think that we're going to get something along those lines. It's going to be a slow expansion. I know that's not the answer everybody wants to hear, but it just kind of is reality. Is it just me, or USFL play was sloppy besides the first game? There's been it's been up and down week to week. Like, we've had really, really entertaining weeks of USFL football, but yeah, it's been kind of spotty. But that's also the case with a lot of these spring leagues. It's been spotty. There are weeks where the teams just show up flat, where the quarterbacks do not perform. And like, honestly, last week and really past 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, there have been a handful of good games. But no, yeah, there's definitely been spottiness, but we are also in the final parts of the season. Most of the teams are locked into the playoffs, and there are teams that are locked out. So there's not as much of an edge, would you say? Because the players, either have all the hope and are set for the playoffs and are thinking about winning the championship, or they're thinking about just getting this season over with and getting off of their team that, you know, maybe hasn't been so fun. I feel like when the XFL comes back, it's going to hurt the brand of the USFL big time. It will be a strong second to the NFL or USA television broadcasting. So yeah, there's been a lot of talk, and the XFL has an advantage schedule-wise. They're going to be launching immediately after the Super Bowl. So that's one big advantage, that people might be fatigued of spring football after the XFL, because we're going to have the, you know, college football, NFL football, XFL football, MLFB, USFL. It's going to be a lot of football, basically football year round. People think that the USFL will move up in the schedule a little bit. I, for one, think that should be a possibility, given really just weather as well being a factor. But I doubt that they would try to compete at the same exact time with the XFL, because the XFL, they're also at an edge being in their own markets on ESPN. It's going to be very big. And yeah, the USFL has to plan, and it's competition time. They got to strategize and do their best to be the best. So we'll see how it all plays out. And I'm very excited to see that competition. And the competition, I should say, will hopefully bring out the best in both leagues. Just me or the USFL? Okay, I think I answered this question already. Yeah. So the offenses, basically same kind of question. Yeah. The offenses have kind of been hit or miss, but a lot of that is due to injuries as well. Never watched the CFL before, but I am now. What's the most fun team to watch in your opinion? Well, I'm a Calgary Stampeders fan, and the reason why is I had a friend who played wide receiver up there, and he gave me a T-shirt. I think it was in like 2011 or 2012, so I was a lot younger back then. So I've always watched the Stamps, and I remember watching the Calgary Stampeders play the Toronto Argonauts in the Grey Cup, and it was snowing, and it was just an incredible, a fun environment and atmosphere to watch. So, I mean, like, from a fan perspective, I've always been really invested in the Calgary Stampeders. From player perspectives, it's fun to watch like a team that always sells out and has a big stadium and a big crowd in this CFL. So it's always great to watch the Blue Bombers when they're hot, or the Rough Riders. Watching the BC Lions now with Nathan Rourke was incredible. And then Lucky Whitehead. They have a lot of emerging stars. I'm excited to see the Red Blacks with Jeremiah Masoli. How about the Montreal Alouettes? I've always been a huge Vernon Adams fan. He was one of the reasons why I got back into the USFL, because I loved watching him at Oregon. I remember when he was playing Michigan State and he threw the left-handed pass, the kind of ambidextrous quarterback play there. So I guess I would say Stampeders, just because they're my favorite team. Out of the first weekend of this season, though, for me, watching the BC Lions was so cool, just watching Nathan Rourke. Oop. What happened to the new USFL and old USFL lawsuit? I'm guessing that they settled on it, but I don't know. I haven't heard much of anything about it. It's kind of just mulled over. Are you going to Canton for the championship game? I'm not. I may try to like live stream for the game though, or something along those lines. Maybe do a pre-game live stream, watch it, and then do a post-game for the playoff games. What did you think of the CFL rule change? Do you think the CFL should have moved the post to the end of the end zone? Well, Well, they didn't move the goalposts. Are you talking about the changes that they made or rules that you'd like to see? So, regarding rule changes, like there are some obvious ones that I think were good. I always thought that they should move the hash marks. I thought that it would always open up the offenses, and we'll see really what that does. We really need a full season of football to see how that affects the game. I think that it helped it for the better. Um, I like having 2 quarterbacks on the field, small things like that. I think that we just still have to see with the rule changes, but the goalposts are, they're right there in the end zone. How do you watch the CFL? Well, you get ESPN Plus, and you can get all the games, and they have a handful of games on like ESPN News, ESPN, ESPN2, things like that. So definitely get ESPN Plus if you want to keep up to date with all the CFL games. They're really great. They're broadcasted by TSN. They have really awesome announcers, and it's a great atmosphere and really fun to watch. My first football memory. Jeez. Probably just watching, Notre Dame maybe with Brady Quinn, watching Jeff Samardzija, Golden Tate, Tommy Zibikowski, all the great 2000s headliners, those football players. Really fun offense, then going into the Jimmy Clausen kind of up and down. Um, I think that would pretty much sum it up because, being a Notre Dame fan, watching those really the 2000s before pre-2010s players. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate that. I've been watching the USFL, but I'm going to be more of an XFL fan. Yeah, and that's a good attitude. A lot of people are, either on one side. I'm on the side of I like watching football. I like to be entertained. Give me whatever and I'll watch it, I think that both leagues are going to be good for football and the landscape. So is the CFL. It's good for football and the landscape of football as a sport as a whole. It's only going to make players better. It's only going to make fans more excited. So, if you can, watch all that you can. Even if you're a hardcore XFL fan, on a random Saturday, if USFL football is on, turn it on and watch it, have a cookout maybe. you know, Football is fun. So there's no need to hate either league. I see a lot of that on the internet, people choosing sides. No need to choose sides. No need to create more hatred and people going against each other. Just do it for the love of the game and the love of the sport. How about the Gamblers? Well, it was exciting to see Kenji Bahar play this season. I was excited. I mean, the Gamblers are better than 2 wins, and I'm honestly proud of them for getting that win, getting that opportunity when the Stallions have kind of been sluggish in this late stretch of the season. And by the way, when we do our playoff preview, I'm not super high on the Stallions because just the way that they've been playing as of late. But I will say this, much earned win by the Gamblers. And we knew a close win was coming because the Gamblers kept losing these close games, and it's been devastating. I want Kevin Sumlin to come back, and most of his coaching staff to come back because they've done a fine job. It's just they've lost the close games, and they could very easily be one of the better teams. They've also had tons of injuries and a lot of just issues staying healthy. So I'm very excited for Houston. What do you think of all these college football teams moving conferences? Well, we don't really talk much college football, so I'll answer this question at 6:30, and I'll answer one last question after this that's already in the chat. I think that this moving conferences and specifically for the Big 12. Now, losing Oklahoma and Texas really hurts the Big 12 in terms of media, in terms of viewership, things like that. There's no doubt about it. But adding the teams that they are adding, I think, adds an incredible amount of value to the competition and possibly could, I don't think it will surpass or equal the amount of media coverage and attention that brands like Oklahoma and Texas brought to the table with the Big 12, but they have BYU. They're adding really big fan bases and really big teams like Cincinnati that have the opportunity to grow on these bigger platforms in bigger stages. Competition wise, Texas being the brand it is, yes, huge loss. But Texas hasn't been relevant for quite some time now. And they didn't really add much competition wise to the Big 12. Now, Oklahoma, 100% definitely did. Competition wise, they're going to be hard to replace. But I think that adding these Big 12 teams, adding the AAC, adding BYU, especially, a program that I think is going to ascend tremendously when added. Cincinnati, I think, is another team. Those two teams, I think, are the biggest in terms of bringing in more fans. Like Cincinnati, that market could potentially get behind that team. And then BYU already has an incredible brand and giant fan base. But I think that it'll end up being more fun. And then the SEC is just going to be insanely fun. So I'm excited about this movement of conferences next. And I'm a Notre Dame fan, and I might be in the minority of this, but I want Notre Dame to move into the Big Ten. One, because geographically, it would help Notre Dame not travel as much. Traveling is such a huge part of sports, excuse me. And I think that it hurts Notre Dame and their players and their staff. It makes it tougher when one week you're playing in South Bend, then you're on the East Coast, then you're on the West Coast, then you're somewhere in the South with that international type schedule, playing sometimes like 2012, playing in Ireland and playing at US. It's just a lot of traveling. Second to BYU, I believe, in all of college football. It's hard to have people travel and play extremely well. And I think Notre Dame, you may not something you may not think about, they kind of get the short end of the stick. Also, it's so much honestly, the Notre Dame schedule is very difficult just team-wise usually. Last year, teams that were on the schedule didn't really live up to the hype, but that's nothing they control. They're still, when those teams were scheduled, were good. More breaks because Notre Dame would then, when joining a conference, be forced to play FCS teams. Now, I know Notre Dame is playing an FCS team in the future, but it's more of a, I won't really dive into that, but having multiple FCS teams and more schedule regulation will end up making the schedule so much easier because essentially having those FCF games are basically bye weeks on your schedule. And as a Notre Dame fan, believe me, I would love to have some more of those FCF games to get tuned up and ready for the big games. Now, you could say, yeah, Notre Dame plays the smaller Power 5 schools or the group of 5 schools, but there's no comparison when it comes to playing FCS teams. They're just not as big. They're just not as talented. Their rosters are just not as deep. And it allows 4 teams in the Power 5 to build up and get through their rosters and really build up depth. And I think that would help Notre Dame tremendously. Also, I would love to play in a conference championship. I don't want to join the ACC because the ACC, in my opinion, is just not good. I'd rather be in the Big Ten. I'd rather have rivalries in the Big Ten. Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, Purdue, those are already teams that Notre Dame has rivalries with. And I would rather be in the Big Ten, if you ask me, not have this halfway thing with the ACC. But again, we're not going to see any change until Notre Dame and NBC end that TV contract, which is really the primary reason why Notre Dame is not in the conference, because of that TV contract. I know that we don't really talk college football much on this show, but that's kind of a question that I've gotten asked a couple times. I'll answer the NFL, the college football questions if they're in the mailbag, because mailbag is free game, of course. But yeah, it all comes down to Notre Dame's TV contract. They'll never be able to join a conference with exclusive TV deals. Other teams and other conferences just aren't going to be happy when Notre Dame comes into a conference and says, you know what, we're not going to split the revenue. We're not going to share it. We're going to have all the money to ourselves. So from a business point of view, for Notre Dame, having that deal with NBC, it's really just awesome for them because they are making bank. But as a fan, yes, I think it would be so much easier if Notre Dame was in Also, Notre Dame wouldn't have to run the table. We already saw that one time. I know it was in the COVID season, but Notre Dame got blown out in a conference championship and made it into the playoffs. I mean, that makes it so much easier. We see teams lose conference championships and get into the college football playoffs. So you have more room for error when you're in a conference. And I would be totally down for Notre Dame to be in a conference and have the opportunity to play for conference titles. Do you think the Stars are better than the Generals? That one's tough because I don't know what the Generals are going to look like when they get to the playoffs. If DeAndre Johnson is going to be fully healthy and back into this offense, or if it's still going to be Luis Perez. But as of right now, if you ask me, geez, it's tough, but I feel like the Stars are the hottest team. And I know that they didn't play as well last week, but the weeks before that, they've been the hottest team in the USFL along with the Generals. Those are it's a shame that they're both playing each other in the semifinals, because I do believe that if they were on opposite sides of the bracket, they would probably be playing in the championship game. USFL Coach of the Year. That one's tough. Either Riley or Holtz. Holtz, I love what he's able to do, and I think it's cool that he brought in all of his La Tech guys to run his offense and build his team in Birmingham. But yeah, it's such an advantage being in Birmingham, having home field advantage for every game. And Mike Riley had real adversity when you lose your starting quarterback and you have to get Luis Perez back. I mean, he lost his quarterback that he drafted. Then he lost DeAndre Johnson and brought in Luis Perez. So I would say, in terms of overcoming what was given to him, I'd say Mike Riley, because he had to really go through so much, losing multiple quarterbacks, winning that amount of games. And I just think he did such an incredible job. Yes, I have heard of the A7FL. Don't really watch it. Don't really know much about it, but I've seen it on Twitter. No such thing as spring football fatigue. I can support that. 16-18 team in the spring, summer, 14-week season, 3 weeks of playoffs. Yeah, that's probably where the leagues would like to go in the future. So I can't really stream all the European League of Football games. I mean, I watch the highlights loosely, if I see a game score was close, I'll definitely watch. If I see some big plays, I follow them on Twitter, I'll watch, but I can't cover all the leagues, unfortunately. That's why I've been trying to get people on live streams like experts, but the reality is not very many people cover the European League of Football, so it's a little tough. Going to our last comment. I like Mike Riley a lot this season. I hate when He was Nebraska coach, but Nebraska's been bad for 20 years. Yeah, it's been tough for Nebraska. It has been. They were probably, they have 4 wins last year, 4 or 5 wins. Best 4 or 5 win team of all time in college football. I think that could possibly be true for Nebraska last year's. They were like the gamblers, just the ball didn't roll their way in those close games. Who in the CFL needs new jerseys most, in your opinion? I've always hated, and well, no, okay, wait, I'll take that back. I was going to say for some reason I was talking about the Montreal Alouettes, but they updated their uniforms. I feel like the Stampeders should go away from the throwbacks that they wear. I'm not a fan of those. Tiger Cats are kind of cool, I guess, but I really like their I don't really think the old Alouettes uniforms were awful in my opinion. So I'm glad they updated those. The Rough Riders jerseys need no change. I don't really think any uniforms need much changing at all, other than Calgary updating their uniforms and then stop wearing the throwbacks. I'm not a fan of the throwbacks. Yeah, someone said the Argos. I feel like the Argonauts could be a little bit. I don't know. I kind of like the Argos. I think they look clean, I guess. That's a good question. I feel like the CFL does a really good job with their uniforms. They look really sharp. All right, we'll get this. This is the last. Okay, well, I'll just finish out with one more question after this. Offensive and defensive MVP. So unfortunately, we're probably going to get a quarterback for MVP, offensive. I bet it's either going to be Kyle Sloter or maybe, gosh, I don't want to say Case Cookis because he hasn't played the whole season. I would probably say Kyle Sloter. And in my opinion, I don't think that he is the best offensive player, but that's usually what happens with these MVP awards. Then on defense, Chris Odom or Channing Stribling, I feel like could be the leaders there. This is a question I have no clue. I thought that the Alliance of American Football was going to be successful over the XFL because they got the head start, but the AAF didn't tell us about their investor troubles, things like that. There's really no way to tell. And, things pop up that will, we can't predict in the future. Would you ever go to Canada for a CFL game? I for sure would. And Jared, that's a great point. That's why I am hesitant to say Sloter, but again, it's MVP usually goes to the quarterback. Heisman goes to the quarterback. Like, it's tough for another position to win an MVP award. Unfortunately, that's just the sad truth about football in the state that we are in. Maybe Darius Victor. He's got 9 rushing touchdowns. That's a ton. And he's second in the league in rushing yards. And I believe he'll probably end up finishing first. Maybe Kevontae Turpin because of his all-round skill set. But again, it's just tough for a non-quarterback position to win MVP. But it's definitely possible. All right, guys. Well, that concludes our stream for the day. Thanks for watching the End Zone. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment so we can move the chains. I'll see you next Monday.